presenting over biodiesel, an introduction and an exploration. Introduction and background information. Biodiesel is a type of renewable fuel that is manufactured from vegetable oil, animal fats, or cooking grease. It's used to power the same engines that petroleum diesel powers, which are called compression ignition engines. And the idea behind biodiesel actually began in like the early 1900s. However, it didn't become popular until around the 1990s because of growing concerns over the sustainability of natural resources and fossil fuels, and then also concerns for the environmental impacts of fossil fuels. And it's just become increasingly popular since. How is biodiesel produced and what does the process look like? It's produced through a process called transesterification. Basically, in transesterification, an alcohol is used to dissolve a catalyst, and then a oil or fat is added to the mixture. And then basically the mixture separates into glycerol on the bottom and then biofuel on the top, and then they can be taken out separately. This is an example of what the process looks like. You can see there's an alcohol, methanol in this case, mixed in with the catalyst, and then it separates off into glycerol and then biodiesel on the top. Developmental status. So how far along are we in the research and development of biodiesel? Well, actually, biodiesel is very well researched and it's been explored and it's widely used around the world. And it's very safe and has been like very much looked into. It's one of the more popular biofuels. Impact on the carbon footprint. Biodiesel is extremely, extremely effective in lowering the emission of greenhouse gases, especially as compared to petroleum diesel. Actually, the emissions of greenhouse gases from biodiesel are 74% lower than the emissions of greenhouse gases from petroleum diesel. And then lowering these greenhouse gases is super important to slowing down the rate of climate change and ultimately helping our environment. This is just a graph that shows the decrease in emissions of greenhouse gases when the percent of biodiesel is increased. And then economic impacts. Biodiesel has had lots of economic impacts, including $23.2 billion of economic stimulation, along with 75,200 US jobs and $3.6 billion in wages paid. That's a lot of money, and that's a lot of people helped by the research and production of biodiesel. The communication of the use of biodiesel. There's been lots of governmental campaigns and protests and initiatives that have pushed for this clean fuel and biodiesel initiative. And then there's also campaigning that's used in bigger cities on public transportation, such as buses, like in the form of stickers that say this is a clean fuel bus or this bus runs on biodiesel. And those advertisements kind of subtly in ways like that. And then there's also media publicity that ranges from television commercials to documentaries that explore in depth the effects and the production of biodiesel. And then these are just a few examples of the way that biodiesel has been campaigned and communicated to the public. My analysis and plan. Well, I believe that the production and the research and the use of biofuel is definitely headed in the right direction. I believe that Americans, as a general population, are growing more and more acceptive of using clean energy alternatives as opposed to fossil fuels. And then for my plan, I would use a public mandate, I believe, although it's a very intense form of implementing the use of biofuels. I think I would start with a kind of trial state. I would use a state that wasn't super opposed to the use of clean fuel as opposed to biofuels. And I would go ahead and implement that all petroleum diesel was converted to biodiesel. And then I would leave the state to be, leave some analysts in the state and have them observe the public attitude, the environmental effects, and the economic effects of using biodiesel as compared to petroleum diesel. And then from there, I would make an educated decision on whether it would be satisfactory and advantageous to the whole United States to implement this use of biodiesel as opposed to petroleum diesel. And then these are my citations.